Right, morning everyone. Hope it's all going good. Um, Today I'm going to talk about sectional titles, and I thought, I've confessed that I think I drive Leanne absolutely crazy with what topic I'm going to give her, and I kind of agonized over this week's. But I thought I'm just going to go step back and go to some basics, and I thought that I would chat about the basics of sectional title property. And I thought I'd just try and cover a broad range of issues around sectional title property and show you some examples. And I thought it might be a nice reminder just to kind of step back and to remind ourselves, as I say, the exact basics around sectional title property. So to take you way back, the first Sectional Titles Act was actually introduced in 1971. So it's the concept of sectional titles is pretty old, and one must understand that prior to the Sectional Titles Act being promulgated, and that 71 Act has now been repealed and replaced by a 1986 Act. So the sectional titles legislation introduced the concept of shared ownership. Before that, you had no real concept of shared ownership at all. And it's a pretty unique concept. I'm not sure how many countries around the world they have exactly this kind of concept. But if you, for example, prior to the Sectional Titles Act, wanted to live in an apartment block, well, then the legislation that governed you was legislation such as the Shared Block Control Act, where the property was owned by a company and there was a share and use agreement. And by virtue of your ownership of certain shares in the company, you would be entitled to occupy a specified part of that building, being your apartment and parking bay, maybe. That's how it was regulated. And today we still have sectional title, and our legislation makes provision for the old share block schemes to be converted into sectional title. But we do, and a lot of the time share, especially down at the coast, is still registered as share block. And when you acquire your timeshare, or when you acquire your shares in that share block, there's transfer duty payable, and there's administrative documentation that is signed, which enables you to take transfer or take cession of your shares, which entitles you to own a portion of the property. But it's not popular anymore. The banks don't finance it. Share block has to be done via cash every single time because the banks don't give you a bond. And of course, so that's why we've got this idea of sectional title, where you have an apartment block, for example, and you have actual ownership of a unit, right? And that unit comprises of a section and an undivided share in the common property. So if you look at sectional title plans, that's how they're designed. You've got the common property, you've got your sections, and you've got your exclusive use areas. And I'll show an example of a deed a bit later, just to sort of give you the idea. So the other important thing to understand about sectional titles is that there's something called the Sectional Title Management Act, which was introduced in 2016. And prior to the Sectional Titles Management Act, everything was governed by the Sectional Titles Act of 1986. And what the Sectional Title Management Act did, it left large portions of the Sectional Titles Act in place governing sectional titles, but it took out all the management type issues out of the Sectional Titles Act, and those are now housed in the Sectional Titles Management Act. So now we have the Sectional Titles Act, we have the Sectional Title Management Act, and of course we have the Community Schemes Ombud Act, which I'll talk about in a moment. So remember that if I'm going to establish a sectional title scheme, I'll go and I'll buy a piece of freehold land, and that land is Res 1. And what I will then do is I will then approach a land surveyor, and what I will do is and a town planner, and what I'll do is I'll make application to the city council to convert my Res 1 land, freehold land, into sectional title land, which is then converted. I rezone it to Res 3, which entitles me to have multiple dwellings on the unit. And once I've then got my I've got my rezoning. I build my building. I then have a sectional title plan drawn by a land surveyor that gets approved by the Surveyor General. And then what I do is I lodge in the deeds office. And when I lodge in the deeds office, I lodge an application to convert that freehold land into sectional title land. And in deeds office terms, you talk about a freehold land register and a sectional title register. So we convert that land from freehold into sectional title. And what that really means is we are converting the property from all freehold into sections and common property. And of course, the owners of those units, we transfer from the developer to individual owners. And then as an owner, well, then you own your unit, and your unit comprises your section to your square meters and your undivided share in the common property. So in other words, the road airways, the roadways, the common areas, the parks, maybe the clubhouse, we all own those in undivided shares, right? So, guys, what's important for us is that, and I'm going to come to more detail about this, is identifying the unit and exclusive use areas. If there's any doubt as to what property we're transferring, we must get a copy of the sectional title plan. And I have on occasion in the past actually got sectional title plans, met agents at the scheme, and we take the plan, we say, okay, let's make sure we're transferring the right unit. Because remember, sometimes, guys, the door number is different from the section number in the deeds office. So the section number is the section number allocated by the land surveyor and approved by the Surveyor General on the sectional title plan, and the door number is the number that goes on the actual door, and they could be different. And it's so important for us to be aware of this, and it's so important for us to do deeds office searches to see, okay, I'm dealing with Marius van Rensburg. Marius says he owns section 12 Villa Vista. Do a deeds office search, but hold on, he actually owns section 34 Villa Vista, but the door number says 12. Okay, so now we understand. The door number is 12, but the section number is 32. So that's the first tip, I suppose. Practical tip is to please check door numbers, and very often your agreements make provision for door number versus section number. The information that we can get around sectional titles, right, is in two places. So with the advent of the Community Schemes Ombud Service Act, right, let me put it this way. Prior to the Community Schemes Service Ombud Act, what we had was every single deeds office has a sectional titles office. And in that sectional titles office, so if I was going to establish a scheme, I lodge all my documents in the deeds office. So my application to convert from freehold to sectional title, a copy of the rules that I want to apply to the scheme, a copy of the sectional titles, the sectional title plan, in any servitudes or conditions that apply to that scheme, we're all going to lodge in the deeds office. And those documents get housed in the sectional titles office at every deeds office. So every deeds office still has a sectional titles office and a sectional title file, and you can go to that file and you can go and look on the file and find the establishment documentation. It's all there, right? Which is actually a pretty amazing concept. If you drive up and down the road and see hundreds and hundreds of sectional title schemes, they all have a file in the deeds office. What's happened with the Sectional Titles Management Act and the Community Schemes legislation is that the Ombud now has to house the rules. So there's now rules that apply, right? So now what you need to do is now all sectional title schemes need to register with the Community Schemes Ombud. They need to pay a CSOS levy, which is a small portion of your actual levy, and we've all heard stories about how the money got stolen. But you know what these guys do is they actually do deliver a service as well, and they resolve disputes, and those disputes can now be resolved without reference to attorneys and going to court. So there is, and it's not absolute, but there's an avenue for us to go, right? And what's important for us to understand is that with the establishment of CSOS, all sectional title schemes had to lodge their rules and their founding documents, homeowners and sectional titles, with CSOS. So CSOS is now holds and houses the rules. And I'm going to cover my last slide now, just because it's convenient. But if we want to, if I'm going to establish a new sectional title register, I submit my rules to CSOS. CSOS approves those rules and gives me a certificate, right? If I have an existing scheme and I want to amend the rules, well, then I must call a meeting, have a quorum, have a resolution, pass my resolution, and then I submit my rules and I get the rules approved by CSOS. And I've done this recently. CSOS actually goes through the rules and comes back and says, you can't do this, you can do this. You know, they actually do regulate and check the rules. But understand, the point that I want to explain to you is that we have a sectional titles office at the deeds office, and we have CSOS, who also now performs a function and houses the rules themselves. So if I want to know where the rules are, I must go there. And the other thing that I sometimes find what people do is they rush off to the deeds office, they look in the sectional title file and they go, but there's no rules that apply to the scheme. Why is that? Why? Because when I open a sectional title scheme, I can either tell the deeds office that I'm going with the rules in the legislation, being the Sectional Title Management Act, or I can present my own rules. So in other words, I can go with the standard rules, or I can go with my own rules. If I go with my own rules, I submit them to CSOS, get them approved, and I file a certificate now in the deeds office. Prior to the legislation, I filed the actual rules in the deeds office. So one has to know where to look in order to understand this process. Deeds office searches, when dealing with sectional title property, it's absolutely critical that you do a property search and a person search. So in other words, if I say to you, my name is Maurice van Rensburg, please sell my property, I own section 12 Villa Vista, right? Well, what's important about this is that you as the agent must establish, what do you actually own in the sectional title scheme? And what we must understand is when we establish a sectional title scheme, there's so many variations as to how we establish it that you have to be Detective Inspector Clouseau, right? So the first thing we're looking for is, do I own one section 2 or do I own 3? So if you do a deeds office search, a property, you'll see I own 12 Villa Vista. If you do a person search, you might see that I own section 12 and 13. 12 is 250 square meters and 13 is 24 square meters. So one is my house and one is my garage. So when you complete your offer to purchase, you need to have both sections that you're selling to the purchaser, because you can't sell the house without the garage, right? I'm also going to have exclusive use areas, parking bays, garages, storerooms, balconies, lifts, stairways, you name it. I mean, you haven't even thought about the kind of exclusive use areas that are there, but the common ones, parking bays, garages, storerooms, garden areas, that kind of stuff. So the way we register sectional title, right? The way we register, and I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. The way we register exclusive use areas is that we register exclusive areas in one of 4 ways, right? One is by means of a notarial deed of cession, and that means it's housed in an actual deed, an exclusive use deed, right? So, and just to take a step back, what is an exclusive use area? It's the part of the common property over which we have exclusive use. So what we have a section. So description of a unit, we have a section. We have a unit that comprises of our section and an undivided share in the common property, right? And of course, the significance of that is that from a conceptual point of view, we own the unit which comprises both, but we own the actual unit, which is our 4 walls within which we operate. And those 4 walls of our section are a certain square meterage, and that square meterage gives us our participation quota. It's the right to vote and control our complex, and it's also the way our sectional title levy is established. So we pay a levy, and the levy is based on our participation quota, which is determined by the square meterage of our unit. Then we have exclusive use areas. Exclusive use areas are part of the common property over which we have exclusive use. And as I was saying to you earlier, your job when you're selling sectional title property is to establish, what am I selling? What exactly am I selling? I'm selling the section, which I must identify. Is there one or is there two, right? Then I must also establish, are there any exclusive use areas? Because guys, when you sell a sectional title property, you can't take the seller's word for it that he says, I've got 2 parking bays, because you're going to run into problems. I've seen it happen. It happens a few times every single year. I get an offer to purchase. It says that there's a section 12 is being sold and there's 2 parking bays. When I check and I do my searches, I find that there's 1 parking bay. Why did the seller tell you that there's 2 parking bays? Well, there's a variety of reasons. One, he parks in the visitor's parking bay. It's not marked. And he believes he owns it. 2, he actually parks in his neighbor's parking bay, who's a little old lady who only has 1 car, and she has 2 parking bays. He now believes it's his parking bay. And for a variety of other reasons. Or else 3, maybe he actually rents that parking bay from the corporate and pays for it, and he just believes it's now his, it's his to sell. So understand that we need to treat people as not understanding the process, and we have to actually determine the process and explain it to them. And that's why I'm saying it's so important for you to determine, what are you selling? Do the due diligence, because you give me an offer to purchase and it's a section and 2 parking bays. I'm going to check, because remember, my job is to transfer to that purchaser what the purchaser has bought, which is a section, 2 parking bays. And I'm going to do the searches. So I'm going to do a person search. I'm going to now say, right, what? Yes, I can see the section. Yes, Mr. Sally, you own it. But do you own 2 parking bays? So I'm going to start. I'm going to do a person search. Can I see the parking bays? Are they registered via notarial deed? Because if they are, it'll be in the deeds office. If I don't see it there, I'm going to step 2. I'm writing to the body corporate. I'm saying, guys, I'm transferring a property. Do these 2 parking bays belong to this unit? And the body corporate will come back and say, yes, they do. Great. I put in my file. I transfer the property. Now I'm protected from the buyer coming to me after transfer and saying, Morris, your job was to transfer what I bought, which is a section and 2 parking bays, but I've only transferred to you you only gave me the section and the 1 parking bay. Problem for me. So notarial deed exclusive use, it's allocated by the body corporate, right? Like, for example, SummerCon. If you do a SummerCon unit, it's allocated by the body corporate. They have internal rules. Or it's actually in the actual rules, the rules that are at the deeds office or at the CSAR. So it's in the rules. There's a schedule there that allocates parking bays to particular units, right? We need to know which. And your job is to establish. Your job is not to go and have coffee and cake with the seller and take a mandate, but your job is to have coffee and cake and question the seller. Where's your parking bay? Please show it to me. How many have you got? Where does your ownership derive from? So that when you complete the offer to purchase, you know that this person has those parking bays, this storage area, etc., 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 etc. Get a copy of the levy statement. Sometimes it's indicated there that it's rented. But do not make the mistake. Do not make the mistake of getting the exclusive use areas incorrect, right? So let me just show you some diagrams here. So this is how we describe what's on screen now is how we describe a sectional title unit at the deeds office. It's a unit consisting of 2 things. 1, section 136, as more fully described on sectional title plan 881 of 2008, in the scheme known as Sandhurst Towers, in the Sandhurst Extension 3 Township, which is 113 square meters. So what do we directly own? We own 113 square meters. B, an undivided share in the common property. In the scheme, a portion to the section in accordance with the participation quota as endorsed in the sectional title plan. The sectional title plan is going to say we have 113 square meters, going to show us where our unit is. and our 113 square meters is our participation quota relative to the full square meterage of the scheme, right? If I'm going to do a person search, and I hope you can see this on your screen, this is a deeds office person search, right? And what you can see from the person search is that this person owns, and it's very small on my screen, so you'll excuse me if I don't read it to you precisely. It looks like we own parking bay P 182, parking bay P 183. We own storeroom S5, and we own section number 136. So from this person search, I can see that we own a section and we own 3 exclusive use areas. Now I need to, and I'm not going to take this and go to my offer to purchase and say, okay, great. Yes, I can see the storeroom. Yes, I can see the two parking bays, and yes, I can see the section. I may just as well have a look at this and see, okay, but there's 2 sections, but now do I have 2 sections of offer to purchase? If not, I must do an addendum. I might also find from a deeds office search, and this is where you need to have a degree of caution, right? I might also find that I'm dealing with an investor client, and this client owns multiple property sections and multiple exclusive use areas, but he doesn't want to dispose of all these units. Now I must ask my seller very distinctly, right? I see that you own 10 sections and you own 25 parking bays. You want to sell 1 section. Which parking bays are you disposing of with the property? So we mustn't make an assumption around what the people are going to sell. And I had an interesting example in the last couple of weeks where what happened was we received an offer to purchase. We then noted that there was a section and there was a parking bay and there was a storeroom, right? When we looked at the offer to purchase, there was only the parking bay and the section and the parking bay, but no storeroom. When we asked the seller, what are we doing in the storeroom? The seller said to us, no, I'm keeping the storeroom because it's part of my pension. I rent out the storeroom. And what we had to explain to the seller was, you can't keep the storeroom. The rule is you can only own exclusive use in a scheme if you also own a section. So when you dispose of your section, you must dispose of all your exclusive use areas. So what she then did was she sold the storeroom to somebody else who owned a section of the scheme, right? So we don't offend the rule. And we transfer simultaneously the section and the parking bay to our buyer, and we transfer the storeroom to somebody else. If we didn't sell the storeroom, the deeds office would have rejected us because we're not disposing of all the sections. Likewise, if you don't own any sections, you can't acquire the storeroom. You must first own a section. Okay? So what I'm saying to you is, look at these exclusive use areas, really come to grips with what you're selling. What you see on your screen is an excerpt from a notarial deed of cession, which shows, so it's described as exclusive use area described as parking parking bay P182, which is 13 square meters in the scheme Sandhurst Towers on sectional title plan 881 of 2008. There's a second exclusive use area is parking bay P183, and there's a third exclusive use area, which is storeroom S5. So we get this from our deeds office search, right? And I can then go and draw out the deed. But again, please, sometimes, and there's no rule. Sometimes we're selling in a sectional title scheme where some of the parking bay, where you got 2 sections, house and garage, then you got parking bays registered via exclusive use notarial deed, like on your screen, and others are allocated by the rules. So you've got to ask the questions every single time to fully understand it. Sometimes people say to me, they say to me, Marius, there's no body corporate in the scheme, okay? And that's simply not true. There's always a body corporate. The body corporate is deemed established upon the transfer of the first unit from the developer to the first purchase of the body corporate is deemed established in law. It may be that the body corporate is not functioning, but that's a different story. And if you're going to sell in that unit, you're going to be so careful to disclose to a buyer, this is an unregulated body corporate, because everyone is deemed to be a member of the body corporate once you take transfer of a unit, right? And sometimes you have very informal arrangements. You have like these little duplexes, a body corporate comprising 2 units. They pay their own insurance, they pay their own levies. I must still lodge a levy clearance certificate, which I need to have signed by both of those unit owners. So make sure that we are friends with our neighbors. But there's no such thing as there's no body corporate. There is a body corporate in law. It may not be a functioning body corporate, but there is a body corporate. If you come across a body corporate which comprises 10 or 15 units and it's not registered, it's not a registered CSOS, there's no levies, then I'd think twice about selling the property, because you potentially looking for some issues. Guys, levies, there are levies, and this is an important, very important aspect, that when selling sectional title property. And I actually did a talk for a group of agents yesterday, and I saw in the offer to purchase, in this sectional title offer to purchase, they got a clause that says Annexus Annexure A is a copy of the levy clearance statement. And I think it's a wonderful idea, because people want to know, how much does it cost me to own and live in this property? What are my levies? And this idea of WhatsApping up and down with the seller. Hi seller, how much is the levy? It's 1,000 rand. Great. Mr. Buyer, it's 1,000 rand. It's terrible. You must get the levy statement, because the levy, there's a levy, an actual levy. There's a garden levy, there's a DSTV levy, there's a security levy, there's this levy, and then it's 2,000 rand. There's an administrative levy, there's a levy for the reserve fund, because remember, there's 2 kinds of funds now with the advent of the Sectional Title Management Act. There's an admin levy and there's a reserve fund. The reserve fund goes in line with your 10-year maintenance plan, which is now obligatory for all body corporates or functioning body corporates. And the idea behind the 10-year maintenance plan is to plan for 10 years worth of maintenance to avoid special levies. It's a great idea, and it does work very well in some body corporates who actually follow the rules. But we want to know, how much is the actual levy? So what I'm saying is, I get the rates and taxes account that goes along with it. But if you want to make a client unhappy, give the wrong information, transfer the property, and then let the guy get his first levy statement and find out that it's wrong. And while I'm talking about levies, special levies is also very important. The Sectional Titles Management Act provides for the fact that if there's a levy payable in installments over a period of time, on registration or transfer, the law is that the buyer takes over that levy. But that doesn't have to be the case. We can alter it in our agreement to sell. What I'm saying to you is, find out, is there a special levy? Understand that most people don't go to the AGMs and delete every email that comes from their body corporate. If I was an agent, I would actually ask the managing agent to tell me, is there a special levy in place on this property right now? Where my exclusive use areas, is there a special levy? And I would find out, and I would determine it, because your seller sometimes doesn't know, and it leads you to problems. If there's a levy in place, Mr. Seller, you're going to pay it in full by registration, write it into your agreement to sell, or make sure your agreement makes provision for it. If there's levy payable installments over a period of time, Mr. Buyer, are you happy to take over this levy? Great. Let's write an offer to purchase. No, I'm not happy. Mr. Seller, you're going to pay it up. Great. Negotiate it and make a plan. Rates and taxes, same thing. Since 2008, July, a sectional title property has separate rates and taxes. Some people say to me, I've never received a rates and taxes account. No problem. Email me the property. I've got a guy to the council who will find that guy's account. It's in the ether. You might not be getting it, but it's out there, and I'll get it for you. Make sure your people understand exactly what levies they are getting. I seem to have skipped my slide on, no, I didn't. Insurance, guys, just as a general concept, sectional title insurance is covered in the levy, okay? And there's various kinds of insurance. If you take out a bond, they want to get the insurance certificate. The insurance is in the levy. Sometimes it covers geysers and sometimes it doesn't. It's kind of worth having a look at. I'm out of time, so I'm just going to go through my last 2 little slides here. Sectional title financials. Guys, that leads to problems. If you can get those financials and give it to the buyer, I would do it. I would give the guys the levies, or at least a letter from the body corporate to say that that it's in good. There's no, that it's all in good standing. it's terrible when these transfers go through and you have uneducated buyers. They go to their first AGM and discover that there's millions and millions of rands owed by the body corporate to whoever the city council. And I think it's arguable whether it's your job. I think that it's a very, very good practice to get the financials and to provide them to the purchaser. And I think it's expected from many purchasers. Section 25 real rights, guys, is the right of a developer to extend the scheme. It'll appear from your deeds office search. Also very important to identify and to deal with. Your office of purchase I've seen have actually dealt with that. And the last point I had was just in terms of rules, which I've already covered. That there's a process to have rules approved, and that the chief ombudsman actually regulates the provision of the rules and the amendment of the rules. Guys, I rushed that last bit, my apologies, but I've hoped that I've given you guys a good overall picture of sectional titles. Remember, identify, do due diligence, know what you're selling, get a copy of, last point, get a copy of those rules. I would hand the rules over to my buyer. If you know they've got pets, make sure that there's no prohibition against pets. Those are the kind of things that really create those emotional problems for us when we're dealing with sectional title. I would get the rules. I would email them to not every buyer who happens to come through the house, but people who are actually interested. I would email them the rules and say, hi, here's a copy of the rules. And I would put a delivery receipt and I'd put in my file to show that I actually sent the rules over. If I know that my buyer's a pet lover and there's no pets allowed, I wouldn't sell the property to that buyer. Same with the rentals. Get the rules. Make sure that the rules suit the person who's going to rent the property. All right, guys, I don't see any questions, but I think that's really it. Sorry, and I rushed that last part. Apologies.
Thanks, Marius. Yes, can you hear me?
I can, thanks.
Thanks, yeah. I think my advice to agents who sell in sectional title, because I'm seeing a lot in Cape Town, is get a copy of the financials and assess as an agent whether it's worth your while to sell units in some of these specific developments, because a lot of them are in big financial problems.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that, and I would, if I was an agent and I was selling in a sectional title scheme and there was a massive financial problem, I'd rather walk away and try and spend my time finding another mandate. And if you're not going to do that, then at the very least you must make an absolute disclosure as to the financial position. People, sellers and buyers, and I say this to agents all the time, have absolutely no clue when they're buying or selling. And I think that once we conceptualize and understand that they may appear very clever and they may be very wealthy, but they just actually don't know what they're doing, and they may not think they need our guidance, but they actually do need our guidance, and we need to help them and help them avoid us having the problems down the line ourselves.
Yeah, agreed. And obviously, look, at a sectional title is more affordable in terms of what buyers can commit to, so it does make it attractive for them to at least start owning property. But yeah, I personally would be very selective what complexes I choose to sell in.
Good, thank you. I'm going to leave you guys to it. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Marius.
To see you. Yeah, and good luck for the rest of the week, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Bye.